Hello, and welcome to this meeting of the Task Force to Reimagine Policing in Brookline. This is our meeting for Friday, January 29th, 2021. I am Raul Fernandez, Select Board Member and Chair of the Task Force, joined as always by our able and talented Task Force members and town staff to continue this important work. We have today on our agenda, we'll have an opportunity for any task force members that have anything they'd like to share in announcements and updates. We'll approve some meeting minutes, see if there's anything left to update on a policing survey. I know the final version is now in. We can talk about that briefly. And also, of course, our subcommittee updates. And I do, in sort of new business, next meeting, want to make sure that we clarify all the dates. We might do this through your subcommittee updates, but clarify all the dates for when all the subcommittee hearings are taking place, and then make sure that we settle on a time for the task force hearing, which you've tentatively scheduled for the evening of Wednesday, February 17th. But I want to make sure we're all good with the time. I am going to pop into the chat before we even begin for panelists and attendees our recently approved updated work plan, which we are right on schedule with. So before we get into the rest of the agenda, any announcements or updates? Okay, let's do it then. The first item of business is to approve the meeting minutes from Friday, January 22nd, 2021. Any last minute edits or updates that anyone needs to make? All right, let's go ahead and approve those minutes then. Once again, I'll go across, just make sure you have yourself unmuted. Those in favor of approving the minutes, Bonnie?
Yes.
Malcolm?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Alexander?
Yes.
Chichi?
Yes.
Eitan?
Yep. Yes.
Almas?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Okay, great. Moving on next.
You missed me, but yes.
Who did I miss? I'm sorry, Ann. How did I miss you? You're right there.
I don't know.
Sorry about that, Ann.
Yeah.
You say yes? Great. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Next up is an update on this survey that Eitan has been working diligently on. And Eitan, we've got the final report, don't we?
Yep. So it should be in the packet today. It's about a 12-page single-spaced report plus the survey questionnaire plus de-identified data. I mean, the data was already de-identified, but we just redacted some of the open-ended responses, which a student did. Some of them potentially identify the people. More of them identify the name of an officer or the name of public official in town or something like that. So we redacted those. So, but anyone can look at the data, do the analysis themselves, and then of course read the report.
Okay. Devin, and if anyone has questions, start queuing up now. Devin, what's the quickest way for members of the public to access the report? Where should we direct them? What's the link we should send them to where they can find that?
Sure. So the report is currently posted in two places on the website. It's part of the packet for this meeting, which can be found under agendas and minutes under the government section right off of the homepage of the town's website. And it's also posted on the Departmental Analysis subcommittee page. So folks can go to Boards and Commissions, Select Board Task Force to Reimagine Policing at Brookline, and then click on the Departmental Analysis. And I can put that information in the chat.
That'd be great if you could do that for panelists and attendees, and then also, the rest of us to share that with whoever we want to share that with. I will say there's probably folks are going to have lots of questions about things like methodology and all those kinds of things. Eitan, how do you want to handle that? I mean, we have our big hearing for the task force that's going to take place on February 17th. I certainly want a presentation of these data to be part of that larger presentation that we'll give to the public and then receive feedback and ask questions. But it's likely that, that's a ways away. It's at least a couple weeks away, and folks may have questions in the meantime. I don't know. I guess I'm asking, are you available to answer questions about that, or how would you like to handle that? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess if people have questions, they can ask me. I should point out also that I've been in touch with Mike Zurab of the Police Reform Committee. He has, I gave him a version of the data as well in Stata format. So he has the data. I'm sure he's going through and analyzing it as well. I don't know if it's on behalf of that committee or not, but so they have it in their hands for sure. I would say, yeah, if there's questions about methodology or the analysis, then people can email me.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. Okay. And well, we have a walk and talk update coming up soon. I was going to mention, I know there was a survey that was done by the sort of corresponding group over on the Reform Committee side. Maybe we can talk about that during that update. But anyway, anything else or any other questions on the survey itself? I know we've covered this extensively, but right. So we will be, for those.
I'll just say, by the way, I mean, it was a lot of work to put that together. I'm really glad we did this. I know there was some difference of an opinion about whether we should do it, but I really feel like we have a better handle on the community's views on these things than before, and so I appreciate everyone coming around to trying this out.
Right. Thanks, Eitan. Thanks for your work on this. I know it's been significant. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to echo, I know this was a lot of work for Professor Schaffner, for you. And that the writing of the report and the analysis was basically part of your volunteer time for this task force. So that's a lot of work, and so I wanted to really appreciate that we have this great product. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, let us get into our subcommittee updates. First one I see on the list is envisioning and community engagement.
Yeah, I'll start. I think it'll be pretty quick. I think like in a lot of other subcommittees, we're in the process of drafting our recommendations and getting ourselves set up for our public hearing. We have it scheduled for Wednesday night. I believe that's the 5th, but at 7:30. So this is, I'm going to stop my video in case the audio is bad. We are going to do it on Wednesday night. This is one where we're trying to do it at times outside of the work days to try to make sure we get the maximum number of subcommittee members, obviously, but then we may be able to get, given the focus of the content, some folks from the Brookline community to be able to attend that as well. I will say that as part of our overall going small approach that we let people in on during the last couple of updates, we had the opportunity since then to use that discussion protocol with 2 groups, or actually I think 3 groups. And I'll let Bonnie give an update as well. But Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity, and then also Brookline Budget Justice. They were good opportunities for us to sit down and do direct conversation with folks to learn more about how they envision policing and public safety serve as input to us. And we believe it may be a protocol that can be used with all sorts of groups, those who are supportive of the current vision, such it is for policing and public safety, and those who have an alternate vision. I don't think the protocol presumes the answers. I think it creates an opportunity for in-depth discussion and make space for a range of opinions. We heard some opinions from Brookline Budget Justice and from Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity that going into it, I think we probably had some understanding of where they stood on their perspectives on policing and public safety, but I don't think that the protocol assumes the answers to the question and sitting down for the discussion. And so we're at the stage now where we're trying to consolidate what we've learned into recommendations. I will also be reaching out to folks across all of our subcommittees just to make sure a portion of our report calls for lifting up the important themes in community engagement across all subcommittees to make sure that there's one place where we might be able to find all of them rather than having to read multiple reports, and using that as the input for next week's discussion. So Bonnie, do you want to add anything about any of your Go Small discussions?
I was able to have one between last week and this week. And I agree, it's an it's a much better approach to do this work. This person prefers to be anonymous, so it requires not writing out the whole interview, but trying to create a document from the interview that they approve that will be attached as evidence, for lack of a better word. But yeah. Anybody else have thoughts?
But just my thought is just that it's I really appreciate this approach. We've sort of gone wide with things like the survey, and we're gonna have these public hearings where anybody can show up. But us reaching out to individual groups and getting a sense of where what they think about our work and where they are on these issues is just so important. So I really appreciate that. Along those lines, I'll just mention that I did speak this past week with the president of the police union, Detective Michael Keaveney, and we had talked in our last meeting last Friday about the potential for presenting privately to members of the union the results of the survey. Eitan and Mike, I know, brought this up. He's into it. So what I'll do is I'll connect, maybe Eitan, I can connect you directly with Michael, and to set something up to do that. So I think that was a sort of productive aspect of our conversation is sort of being able to get together and have a conversation directly with especially rank and file police officers about the findings of the at least the survey so far. We've got lots of other findings from our other work, but we'll open the conversation there. So I just wanted to make sure to note that.
I also want to say that in no way, just because we're writing and presenting our findings, these conversations are going to continue. And this was only the beginning. Now that we finally, after all this time, figured out the best way to do this. So there will be more, and it will continue.
Kristen, I see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to lift up that as part of the conversations that we're having, we're specifically asking in the dialogue with folks whose perspectives and who in the community, whose perspectives are we missing the opportunity to gain insight from? And it feels like that's a particularly important part of that discussion is folks who may not feel like their perspective might be listened to or might not be regarded as this is the person that you really should consider talking to. The way that we've constructed that in the protocol is specifically to ask people who are important to you, whose voices are being included and whose voices are being left out. And so it feels like it gives us the opportunity to continue to build a set of folks that we can then come back to have subsequent discussions on the other side of the task force work.
Is there, maybe you already have, I'm just thinking about different populations in my head, and maybe you're already on top of this, but did you need any support sort of gathering young people in any way? Maybe, students at the high school, for instance?
All of the support.
I'm wondering if there are members of the task force that are uniquely situated to help with that. Malcolm laughs. Is the best bet if folks have ideas about sort of smaller populations that they can also not just have ideas about, but help sort of wrangle some folks for y'all to talk to get in touch with you?
I think that would be great. One of the things that came out of the conversations with Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity is that very point, the ways that we are able to include in a credible and authentic way things like students and their voices, and making sure that we can do that in a way that it doesn't feel like we're just asking you, but we're not really going to consider what you have to say. And so I think there's probably some scaffolding that we need to do to make it feel like it's authentic. But that was a particularly important thing that was lifted up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In those conversations, sometimes they can feel like a set of questions that we have, but also the way I like to approach them is kind of a dreaming session. Like, here's, we could talk about what's wrong and what isn't working and what we can do as far as partnerships, but like also dreaming, going back to the very beginning of the task force, thinking about how to imagine what would be better and not be stopped by what already exists. So, beginning to lay the seeds for the work beyond this as well, to inspire people to follow us and to come up with things that don't exist right now. It's the good part of the interviews.
Right. Are there questions for this group or thoughts? All right, good to go. Appreciate the update. Continue the work, and again, folks, if you've got a group that you're in touch with that you can very easily connect members of the subcommittee to engage with, please let them know, and for the subcommittee, let us know how we can continue to support your work. This is really important. Right. All right, thanks. Next up is the Vulnerable People and People in Crisis Subcommittee.
I can start. I think we believe that our draft is coming along pretty well, and we've made some significant changes to it over the last week. So we've all been working on it offline, discussed it yesterday. There are some more tweaks we want to make to it before the public hearing, which is scheduled for Thursday, February 4th at 6 p.m. And we've gone ahead and invited the people who we interviewed. So that includes the Brookline Center for Community Mental Health folks and the Annabelle Lane and Jen Pastor. We've done that. I'm trying to think. I guess one of the questions we had for the public hearing was that do we want to do for our subcommittee public hearing, are we going to be doing like a little bit of a presentation of the findings and as far as like an outline, do something like that to begin with? I believe some other subcommittee did their public hearing, and I wasn't quite sure if that's what happened with that, or just wondering about that.
Yeah, I watched the Departmental Analysis Subcommittee public hearing, and it seemed that you guys did a very, very brief overview of your findings and then just open it up to the public. And that was the approach I was thinking we should take. Does that sound right to you, Raul? Or
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think that it could be helpful also to have visuals. So if you had any slides you wanted to share on, here's what we're working on. I know that requires some technical support perhaps. But I think that can be helpful. But yes, I would definitely start with, an overview of the work that you've done, and how that led to the conclusions that you've reached so far, and then invite the public to comment. I would say the very first thing you should do is also make sure you put a link to your report. Ideally, people that are showing up to comment on the report have read the report, but that's not always the case. Putting a link to the report, and that way if you need to direct people there, you can say, actually, it's on page 7 of the report. The link is in the chat. You can do that. And that's it. It's a real opportunity for people to share what's on their mind. I think in the last, we'll report on this in a little bit, but I think people asked some really, really great questions at the Departmental Analysis hearing. So it looked like everyone who showed up, took the project seriously, and was ready to contribute.
and we're thinking that we would just let people have a public comment for 3 minutes, and that we're not really going to be commenting back unless somebody's asking us a direct question about the work, how we, if there's something specific that they want more information on. Otherwise, this is just a time for folks to give us their opinion in 3 minutes without a lot of comment from us and just move on that way. I mean, I guess we're expecting perhaps some negative comments that we just want to give space to without having to get into a kind of argument kind of space. I don't know.
I mean, I would go into it with an open mind. I know that, we've all been through on the select board, we've all been through public comment periods where, that where sometimes comments were less than constructive. And that may or may not be, something that you experience, but it's an opportunity for people to say what's on their mind, and that's okay. But I do think that most of the people that show up to these sessions, while they may be critical of the work, and that's their right to be, offer, something for us to think about in it. So just maintain an open mind, and it should be fine. I do say, please do work with Devin to make sure that you've got the appropriate safeguards to avoid, some of the stuff that we saw earlier on with things like Zoom bombing and some really truly horrible comments that were, that weren't the folks that weren't there to be productive in any way, just to sort of spew hate. So just make sure to work with Devin to provide for those safeguards.
And it would be okay for us to, even for Brookline Center for Community Mental Health, we could send them the draft in advance, right? Because we really want them to not look at it during the presentation, but in advance. So I know, Anne, you reached out to them, but I was just it's okay because it's public, right? So it's fine to send it to them in advance. I think we should do that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as soon as it's finalized on our end,
we can do that early.
Draft form on our end.
Yeah,
we can certainly send it out.
Right. Okay.
And please make sure that the entire task force gets, and again, Devin can help with that we all get access to that report too. I mean, it'll be a public document, so the public has access to it, but that we get it in our inboxes so we can share it with people and invite people to show up to the subcommittee hearing and have their voices heard on it. I've got some folks sort of that haven't been involved in this work, but in the sort of mental health space and other spaces like that I would love to see if they're available to show up and help make this report better. So share with us.
Promise to do that.
Yeah,
great.
That's good. And I know we had another question about Alex and for Devin, right? About the do we as far as this, forget the terminology, the panelists, inviting them and making them a panelist or something, is that, have you figured that, we did figure that out, right, Alex? You said you had figured that out, or you were going to?
You mean
let's talk about this piece offline, because I got an email from Devin and haven't had a chance to look it over yet.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
All right. So remind us when that public hearing is taking place.
It's February 4th, Thursday night, starting at 6, going to 7:30.
And I do know there's already been, by the way, thank you, Devin, and others helped put together a graphic with the dates and times of all of these subcommittee meetings, and we'll make sure that we get that circulated, as best we can, very quickly, so that members of the public know when these meetings are and we're ready to attend. So, but thanks for that. Any other updates here? Any questions for this group? All right, let us move on now to the Walk and Talk Subcommittee.
Hey. So our meeting, as probably all of your meetings are, is centered around exactly how to frame everything, how to frame the findings, how to, how specific or not specific to be. As we're thinking through what we're doing here and what we have found, obviously, there's a lot of positive, but the negatives are significant, if not a number in reasoning, historical reasoning. When we think about work, anti-racist work, I would like that, not me, but we would like that to be the framework that public safety is centered in. So where am I going with this? So yeah, I lost my chain of thought. Anne, jump in. My brain just flatlined. Yeah, so we're shaping it. We're we're interviewing people. I have interviewed, sorry, I'm coming back. Interviewed a BHA resident, and some of the common things that we're seeing is a large anxiety with the mere presence of policing, not just in walk and talk, but elsewhere. It's kind of a broad thing about the history of policing and the indelible mark that the history of policing has left on Black, brown, and poor communities. So we're hearing, things about, just worry about losing their home, about being evicted for one thing or another if someone in their family runs into trouble, if their kid gets arrested or, what have you. There's this enormous anxiety on the daily with police and other things working around them. So the idea that police officers in this position are there to serve the residents needs to take that into account. So we're trying to frame that.
I can.
Yes, please.
If you want. I have an interview set up today by phone with somebody at BHA who is probably going to wish to be anonymous as well. But finally, we're getting a few interviews going. It's taken months and months and months to get people to agree to do it, which is I'm thrilled. I guess what it comes down to for us is this walk and talk program, the way it's currently set up, serving everybody in the community in a way that is positive for them. And Raul, I remember you said something sometime recently about if a program is serving 80% of folks in a positive way, but 20% in a not so positive way, for example, is that a program that's really working? Or can we think about ways of changing it to make it satisfactory to 99%, 95% of the people that it's supposed to be serving? And that's what it really comes down to for us. There's a walk and talk survey that was just released by the Police Reform Committee, which shows a large percentage of the number of the respondents to the survey were very positive about the program. But when you look into the kind of demographics of who the respondents were, they were primarily folks over 51 or older. I think it was 77% were 51 or older, primarily white. And they were saying generally positive things about the program, but there were a lot of voices missing in that survey. And so who is the program serving? Who feels comfortable with the program as it is at BHA is what we're left with. And what coming to the conclusion is that it may be serving some folks well, particularly older people, residents of BHA, possibly predominantly white residents of BHA. But what we hear from younger people of color residents in BHA is that it's uncomfortable for them, that they feel uncomfortable with the program. So with that all being said, can we build a program that serves the needs, the stated needs of that community in a way that makes it an effective program for everybody? And that conclusion kind of leads us to, it appears to be that the police as the providers of the service is the sticking point. And can we make a program like this for folks at BHA and potentially residents in Brookline outside of BHA that serves those needs without it being provided by police? So I think that's where we're landing, is services and supports for community-based services and supports for folks, being able to give a kid home, a ride home late at night, to being able to help seniors worried about having their computer hacked, to everything else that Walk and Talk is providing right now, can potentially be better provided by non-police officers in a way that would serve the needs of everybody in the community.
Can I, well, I just want, if we can break for any questions or comments from other members of the task force. I just want to start by just saying, I watched the presentation on the data from the survey that the Reform Committee did on Walk and Talk in public housing. Let me see if we can get the raw data, and Eitan, get that over to you to see what you think about it. Just my preliminary thoughts. There were 70 respondents. Half of the respondents actually said they never either didn't know the program or weren't sure if they knew the program. And I'm not sure if the subsequent answers from those respondents were included in all the later data. So we've got potentially some people that say, I don't know this program, actually weighing in on whether or not they think it's a good program, or literally saying, I don't know this program, and then weighing on whether it's good. So I think we need to look into that. Data wasn't presented by race. Even then, there were 6 Black respondents. It'd be very difficult with the numbers being so small to generalize based on the response. And by the way, there were responses there that said 20% of the people were uncomfortable with police presence, such as it is in public housing. But either way, I just think, whatever however the data fits your narrative, I just don't know that there was enough data there to generalize and to reach any actual conclusions. And then, just over half of the people who completed the survey were white. A majority, 63%, were 65 and over, which is a very different population. There was conversations, including Michael Alperin, the director of the BHA, noting the need to separate out really, families who live in the Brookline Housing Authority properties from not family seniors, and that they're having vastly different experiences, and they're also coming to housing in some very different ways as well. So I think there's just a lot more that needs to be understood about the data that was brought in through that survey. I say this not because I'm trying to take any knocks at anybody that was trying to make a good effort to get feedback from folks in the BHA. We know how difficult that is to do, to get respondents to be willing to weigh in on these issues. But I think it's I think we have to be careful to generalize based on a small number of responses. I mean, literally 35 people who said, "Yeah, I've heard of the program, and here are my thoughts." And it's not clear to me whether that 63% is part of those 35 people, or the 63% of the 70, or whatever it is. There just wasn't enough data presented, and we didn't have access at the time anyway to the raw data, so that we can see what we think about it. But I'm hopeful that will be shared with us and the public soon, so that we can the same way we're sharing the data from the
we have the data, so we can share it with you, Raul.
I mean, I'd prefer you share it with. I mean, you can share it with me for sure. I'd love to see it, but I think Eitan would be able to provide an analysis even than I could.
I'm saying it share. I mean, within this group, but it has people's names and contact information, so we have to figure out how to.
Yeah,
I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable sharing anything publicly, even if it is already public that has people's names.
That's why it's not public. That's why.
No, that's also something to really, really take into consideration. This was not anonymous in any way, so that has an effect on who responds, a very large effect. So consider that.
I would say even before you share it with us, if you wouldn't mind de-identifying it, even if it might be in the public, I think we shouldn't.
I wonder if it's not in the public. Michael Zorab sent it to the Walk and Talk subcommittee. Maybe he has a file already that's de-identified.
We won't send it with that information.
Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts, members of the task force or staff?
Also, apologies for not being able to form sentences. There's been many late nights pulled.
I hear you. You
I'm
picked it.
tired. Yeah, no, I apologize.
Yeah. Thoughts.
All right.
Sorry, one thing. So the conversation that's going to happen is not going to be a conversation, right, in these public hearings. Should it be modeled similarly to select board public hearings? Because things are going to come out that are going to need to be clarified or corrected. Is that not the place to do that? Because that always turns into something. I just want to have my head set correctly for this.
Yeah, I think certainly questions should be answered, right? And so if someone has a question about, how you reached a certain conclusion or how this recommendation might work to the extent they're able to respond, I think you should. It's important that folks not just having left feeling like they had their say, but they were actually listened to. And you might say like, hey, that's not something we've considered, but when we talk about this, when we meet next to talk about, how this hearing went, we'll make sure we consider that. And do consider that, of course. But I think there's an opportunity to engage a bit with members of the public, and it depends on how many people you have there. If you have 100 people there, you've got to move much more swiftly through to make sure that everyone that's shown up to say something has an opportunity to. If you've got, as we did in the last subcommittee hearing, probably about maybe 10 or 12 attendees, maybe it's a little bit more than that, I'm not sure. We had more of an opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the people that were there. So it really depends. Okay, let's move on to our school resource officers subcommittee.
So I can speak to that. Hello, we're going to have our public hearing coming up this Tuesday at 1 o'clock. It's going to be 90 minutes long. We're inviting written submissions. If you can't make it, you can email those to Devin. We hope to have our draft report finalized by, say, Sunday night, Monday morning, for folks to be able to review before coming. We were a little bit earlier in the draft stages, I should say, than we wanted to be. But we're continuing to have really good conversations about how exactly we want to frame our recommendations, I do want to raise really quickly, I believe, one piece that we discussed, I think for the first time this week. I'm sorry, I'll come back to it in just a minute. I'm trying to make sure that I also have, a brain in my head and the ability to form sentences. But where I think we're in pretty good shape and having strong conversations. Does anybody else on the subcommittee want to speak up while I figure out what I was going to say?
I'll just add, researching to the last minute, I guess. Speaking with the K through 12 health and wellness coordinator, she made the suggestion that we reach out to middle school folks, just mostly because that is the most unclear use of police, in my opinion. They're sort of in these aware classes, there's sort of resources for admin, but there's no MOU. And frankly, they were just sort of thrown into the idea of school resource officers really late in the game. It was really as we were doing this work that all of a sudden we discovered there's not one, but 4 school resource officers. So I had a really good conversation with the interim principal at Driscoll, who's a childhood friend, but he's also served in a vice principal role, which at a lot of the elementary schools, the vice principal is the one who handles discipline. So he had a really distinct perspective on things. And when the police are called in as well, I met with Maria Lataz, who's the head of Pupil Services for the district. I might be using her title incorrectly. Essentially, she's over any support people, social workers, guidance counselors, things like that for the district. And she and I had a good conversation. And then I'm meeting with Leslie Ryan Miller, who is the only African-American woman who leads one of the elementary schools in Brookline right now. And I'm meeting with her shortly after this meeting, just to get some scope of what they perceive the role of SROs are in the middle school. And that's actually been very clear. It's helping clarify some of the things. And I think it's also reinforcing some of the things the SRO committee has thought, that there isn't much of a uniform direction. And it's clear that there's some need for police liaison, but probably not school resource officer as defined in the memorandum of understanding.
So thanks for that, Malcolm. I want to just jump back in just for one piece of information that I think folks should be thinking about, and then also sort of an overview of what you can expect from our recommendations. One thing that it was news to me, but not to some other folks in the subcommittee, and certainly other folks who have parents in Brookline Public, have children in Brookline Public Schools. But after hiatus, they've decided to continue the AWARE program, right? So the sort of the SRO function in the middle schools, at least is partly the way you can think about that, shifting the focus from health and wellness and cyberbullying to racial justice. So their plan, which as far as we can tell was not made in conjunction with any parents, folks found this out through an email to parents last week, that police will be in the schools teaching kids about racial justice, which is certainly a surprise and not something that I think is an appropriate use of police, or really the best that we can do to teach kids in Brookline about racial justice, as we discussed in our meeting. So what you can expect to see from us in terms of recommendation, we've pretty much come to the conclusion that there should not be an SRO program. Certainly not one at the beginning of the next school year without addressing the issues that we've raised, without having something that's a bona fide partnership with parents, without something that you've actually presented to the school committee and select board, and a tangible lesson plan that can be vetted and is effective. And so we're going to be writing all that out to the extent that it's not yet written this weekend.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, if I could, really quickly on the AWARE program. I'll stop my video. And I think it ties into what Malcolm was saying in that the middle school, the K-8 school deployment of policing resources probably feels the most nebulous. And the choice to make the adjustments in the AWARE curriculum was news to many of us. I think that largely was revealed in the letter from PSB to parents and families. I'm not a Facebook user, but I understand there's a fair amount of discussion around that very change in some of the townwide discussion groups on Facebook as well. And so I think it's an instance where we continue to see that the plan is murky, and parents finding out after the fact what the priorities are around use of policing resources in schools just feels a bit erratic. And I think part of what we're trying as a subcommittee to ensure, part of what we've called for is let's understand the breadth of what we propose to do and then decide who are the best resources to be able to deliver that. Rather than our continuing to do something that only some of the people who were around that originally authorized it are still around to be able to vouch for it. Let's put everything out on the table for discussion, determine who are the best resources to be able to lead that work, and then also talk about what the impacts may be on, if there are disparate impacts on folks in choosing to move forward in that way. So I've said on a number of instances, the choice to use police officers for the AWARE curriculum cannot be analyzed or thought about absent the context of how people experience the larger effects of policing in the community. So we might look at it as an independent program, but it's a network, an accumulative, an accretion for lots of folks in the community. And so I think it's particularly important that we look at that program in light of the full experience of policing and public safety in the town.
All right. Yeah, I mean, all I can say about this AWARE thing is that this is just stunningly disconnected from everything that we've been hearing from the community. I don't understand it. But I'm glad that there are parents and others that are in school leadership, folks in school leadership that are looking into this. And I can't even gather my thoughts around something like this. The idea that the police would take it upon themselves to teach about racial justice, and I can't even. All right.
Raul, sorry, I just want to make Safian put something in there about the Sagamore. I just would say I do know they are following our work, and very specifically the school resource officer. So a Sagamore reporter reached to me, which happens a lot just because I'm in the building, and I directed them to our website on the town and minutes and stuff like that. And so they are following our work. It's hard to tell if and when they publish because it is a student-run newspaper and it's the end of the quarter, and there were some cases mid-years and other things. So it's always hard to tell when stuff will surface, but they are following our work, and very specifically the school resource officer work.
I'll just say this is not something before a Brookline parent brought it to my attention. This change to the AWARE program is not something I became aware of either in our work here through the task force or as a select board member. I think a lot of folks make a lot of hay out of us select board members being police commissioners. And I think when it's convenient, folks say that we're police commissioners and we should be supporting the police department or something else. And when it's, there are many times when something like this happens, when folks know that we're in a really fraught moment, a delicate moment, where two committees constituted by the select board are trying to address issues related to racial justice and policing, and that without consultation of of the select board or these bodies sort of makes a change like this sort of in the middle of the year. Anyway, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The other thing I'll say is this is I want to make sure that we get the school committee involved in this conversation. I mean, all 9 members of the school committee. So if you can just make sure, I'm sure some are aware, but if you just make sure that all 9 members of the school committee are aware of the public hearing when it's happening, and send them directly your report when it's ready, Sunday night, Monday morning, whatever it is, send them that report directly and say, we'd love for them to be present and to weigh in at the public hearing. I think that'd be helpful. Okay. Anything else here? Good. All right, thanks, y'all. Moving on to departmental analysis.
I can start just by saying we had a public hearing. It was well attended, but we didn't have very many comments, actually. A bunch of people just came to come, and a couple of people wrote in the chat, like, you know, came to be supportive of your work, but don't really have anything to say. Couple of clarifying questions. That was basically it. We dedicated an hour to it, and I think we closed after about a half hour. So I mean, my take is that our work is essentially done and ready to forward on to the task force. I don't know if anyone had anything else to add.
After the hearing, we did get a longer comment from Ryan Black, which I'm looking over right now. And there may be some last minute edits. I think there's a couple things from the survey I do want to reference in there. But yeah, I think for the most part, we're basically done. So.
Feels good, huh? Yeah, same takeaway. I think it was really productive use of our time. I think we got some good clarifying questions and comments. I always think, you know, it's good the questions that come up now are questions that might also come up later throughout the process. So for the other subcommittees, just take note of what those questions are, even if they are like, well, it's answered on, you know, page 3 of the report or whatever. Just know what those are and maybe work those into your presentation moving forward. Or into our collective presentation moving forward, so that we can get ahead of some questions that are likely to come up.
Right. I mean, I would say that briefly, the 2 things that I think are challenges are, one, on our subcommittee, we are limited in a bit in talking about traffic enforcement by the data that we have on traffic enforcement. And so someone asked about, well, you know, how are groups that maybe a police officer identify as Hispanic or Latino, but wouldn't self-identify, and we're like, we don't have data on that. We don't have much data at all, really, on traffic enforcement. The data we have, I think, is interesting and compelling, and but we're limited by it. Similarly, I think on the recommendations for full, you know, permanent oversight committee, there's just a lot of questions that are going to be answered down the road that we don't have firm answers to. So I think both those things are just going to come up again, you know, in future public hearings, and there's not too much we can do about it at this stage. That's my take.
And I'll just say on the oversight piece, I mean, we may be able to fill that out a little bit more. I'm a little cautious there, only because I think that the essential, you know, it seems like, and I mentioned this at the subcommittee meeting, it seems like both the reform committee and the reimagining task force agree that there needs to be some kind of oversight body. Whether or not that body is advisory, simply advisory to the select board. You know, we contemplate a body that is advisory to the select board, but also has its own inherent powers. You know, that is an essential question for the select board. If the select board decided to go the road of an advisory body that's simply completely advisory, then that's one direction. If the select board decided to go with a board that is advisory but also has its own powers, that's a completely different direction. And you know, I think that this either the subcommittee or that this task force spending a great deal of time producing a 15-page document about how an an oversight board that has teeth, that has powers, would exactly operate, only to find out that the select board, when it comes their way, is not at all interested in such a body, is not a particularly good use of our time. And so I think if the select board wants to go the route of an oversight body that has teeth, then they should let us know that. And then we can go and say, all right, now let's figure out how this would work. But I think we need that direction from the select board before we spend many hours trying to sort of craft the exact right body that probably later on is going to end up getting changed by board members and others anyway.
Raul, can I just ask you a question about that? Is the difference that seems to have emerged from our task force and the reform committee, do we know that that's actually a difference of opinion, or they just kind of had a different planning process that led to that? Is it possible we're on the same page and we just don't know it, or we're definitely not on the same page?
I mean, there'd probably be a conversation, would require a conversation with members of the reform committee. My take is we're not too far apart, but that is a pretty significant difference. Whether or not this body has its own powers or not is a pretty significant difference. So the sort of the template for this would be something like the transportation board, and the folks are following what the transportation board is working on, and buses in Gateway East and that kind of thing. You see the transportation board has its own powers, although the members are appointed by the select board. But it does have its own powers to make its own decisions that within the realm of everything that's part of their charge. Folks can appeal to the select board. I don't think it happens too often, but it happens occasionally. And then the select board can decide to either uphold what the transportation board decided or not. But that's the model that best fits what we've been putting together on our end. The other model is much like most boards and committees, which is, hey, help the select board make the best decisions by giving them your best advice. But the select board is welcome to agree or not agree, and it's a very different process.
I would just say
just to be clear, I wasn't meaning to take any of the feedback from the public hearing, whether it was Ryan's detailed one or some of the comments about elected versus appointed, and change the report, but to acknowledge that there had been some public comment on it. The advantage of things like a Google Drive is we could actually post some of the comments with a link, but yeah, no, I wasn't planning to make any recommendations about the structure or beyond what we currently have, because you're right, that's down the road.
Right.
For all we know, the select board be like, we don't want any committee, and that's the end of that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it seems to me that there's two reasons why one might prefer the advisory committee to a committee with teeth. One is just like logistical; it's easier to get done, and the other one is sort of a policy preference. If it's logistical, though, I think that does imply that maybe we could work more now, either on our own or with the other committee, to solve those logistical burdens. If it's a policy difference, then it makes sense. I think what you said, Raul, which is like, well, then the select board has to kind of decide. But I guess maybe I don't know which one it is.
No.
So I don't know. Maybe it's worth asking. Should we? But I haven't followed their work.
Yeah. Malcolm.
Yeah, I just want to be really frank. I'm actually quite concerned about the select board being the only determiner or decision maker about who is on a civilian committee. Just being on the Commission for Diversity and Inclusion, there's people I know who've applied, interviewed, and never heard from again in terms of being on the commission. And select board hasn't had to even answer why. And so especially on a commission that for a long time didn't even have its capacity of members. I frankly worry about that. I also worry about them stacking the deck, frankly, or saying so and so is too radical to be on there, and so I know the select board is the commissioners, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have any say or any role. Not that Lloyd needs any more work, but I think especially a commission like this needs somebody whose job is to look at this through a diversity focus, and office, and so I think we need to think beyond this. I mean, I don't know what Ryan had said, so I don't want to jump into that. But, I am frankly worried about giving the select board, who has never seemed to want to have a civilian committee, now the power to determine who all gets on that civilian committee. And so, I worry about granting power to the commissioners who haven't been willing to do all the other stuff and not haven't really had the capacity to do all the other stuff to monitor the police. And so, my suggestion is we come up with something. Not necessarily, I'm actually, with much chagrin, putting it on my shoulders with envisioning to say, we should come up with something and then let the select board weed through that, but don't let them start from scratch. No, we're saying this, maybe you get 2 appointees, 5 are elected, and Lloyd gets 2 appointees or something. It's just totally thinking off the top of my head, because that's where I'm at.
Other thoughts on this?
One of the things mentioned during the subcommittee meetings, just to the point that it would be all up to the select board, is, town meeting members could file a warrant article about this too. The select board's not the only avenue to get this adopted.
Right. And that's something I have in my notes that I wanted to reflect on too. Anyone else? Alexander, I don't know if you were ready to jump in or not.
I was just thinking that I have similar concerns about the select board.
Yeah. If it'd be helpful to get some sense. This question about elected versus appointed, by the way, came up and I didn't respond to this particular part because there's costs and benefits to each model. And I always also try to think about how the worst people might use any individual system to benefit some kind of agenda, but I'm still not sure. I think an elected model could work, but also I worry about who gets elected in these roles and whether or not they've got the kind of qualities that folks that are in this task force would want. I mean, you can't guarantee those things. Of course, then with appointments being made by a select board, depending on how specific the criteria are, you could also not get people that you would want on such a board. And there's a lot, as at least one member of the Reform Committee reminds us, there's a lot of oversight boards out there that either just function as a rubber stamp, literally everything that the police department wants to do, they say yes to, or doesn't particularly operate in the way that we'd want an oversight board to operate. Anne, you've got something on this.
Hi, morning everyone. One of the things to think about in looking for sources of nomination is if you think about what came out from police reform, you see that many of the commissions that have been set up as a result of the state police reform law cites there will be this number of members that are recommended from the Secretary of State, this many from the House, this many from the Senate. Is in looking at, if you go down the road of any board and commission, and whether you apply it to a newly created one or even our existing ones, is that there be different sourcing for members of boards and commissions, so that there is the ability to do that. And obviously the select board is the overarching body that it would be part of, bylaw changes and things like that. But if you're looking to provide a source for more diverse viewpoints and to address the issue that Malcolm talked about, and whether it's CDICR or otherwise, that you can look at, it isn't all select board approved, but it is, the sourcing will come from different locations or different representatives. And that may assist in dealing with some of the issues that have been discussed today, but also some of the issues that are going on with other boards as well. And that it would just go for select board review as opposed to approval. So I just wanted to offer that thought.
And that was helpful.
I have to say, I mean, I think I think that sourcing boards from different locations is a good idea. I'm not an expert on policing, but I am an expert on elections, so I do all day long. And I will say that I feel very strongly against having elected positions for something like this. We have the lower tier election we have, the more concentrated the electorate is among, first of all, white people in every jurisdiction, and organized interests, municipal unions, and all that. Until the day comes when we have Brookline elections on the federal cycle, even numbered years in November, that's the only circumstance in which I would support having any positions like this elected. I don't think, I'll send you an article in the chat that I wrote 5 years ago about how Democrats suppress voter turnout, and it's through off-cycle elections for lower tiered offices. So I'm going to send that right now for your reading pleasure.
I'm curious about Malcolm's comment around sort of fleshing this out a little bit more. Is that what do other members of the task force think? I mean, would you like to see this fleshed out a bit more, the oversight function specifically? Where do you all land on that?
I don't think there's, as the person who's doing the drafting, I don't think there's going to be any consensus about this. And I fear that the level of details we're looking at will only bog the process down. I'm happy to maybe lay out some of these issues, but I don't think we're going to come to any agreement on elected versus appointed. I happen to think there are merits to both, and, seeing what happens with judges, for example, it's much better when they're appointed than elected at the state level. And then, the structure and such, I've seen other commissions with that kind of different bodies get different appointments, and that's not a bad idea, but do we really want to hammer out what authorities appoint who at this point when we don't even know where this is going to go? So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. I think we'll stick with what we've got for now. If anybody else has something to say, now would be the time. I will say this. I think Chi-Chi's point is an important one, and this is something that is going to be sort of looming over the select board as it makes its own determinations about how to move forward. Is that in our current system of government, I tell people this all the time. It's town meeting is the easiest position to get elected to, but collectively, town meeting has the most power. The select board can't tell town meeting what to do, but town meeting can tell the select board what to do. And so I think it's going to be important for us as a board to really think about whether or not the proposals which we ultimately adopt meet the moment in the eyes of town meeting in particular. The community, of course, but there's another elected body out there, and there's the ability for any resident or citizen maybe of the town to put forward a proposal through town meeting, and we've seen this happen cycle after cycle, that actually changes some of our bylaws, and including things like oversight could be part of that. So I think I'm hopeful that the board, recognizing that, will make sure that we put together some manner of oversight that does look like actual oversight, that isn't just something that helps us know more about what's happening in the department, but doesn't actually provide the kind of accountability and transparency that so many people in our community have told us they're looking for. If not, I suspect a Warren article would be coming very shortly to do just that. So let's we've got on March 2nd, we'll make a presentation to the select board, and we'll see where how folks are feeling about what's presented, get a sense of exactly where which direction folks are interested in supporting, and we'll take it from there. Okay. Any other thoughts in this space? Okay. Good. Right. All right. Those are our updates. There's opportunity. Just one thing I want to make sure that we check off before we move on to any other updates that you all may have, or new business that you may have. So we set aside, and once again, for anybody that joined us after I shared this in the chat earlier, is the work plan that we have. And one of those dates, those key dates, is February 17th, which is a presentation by this task force to the public, and a public hearing, an opportunity to hear what people think about our work. We haven't set a time, though. I wanted to suggest that a start time of 7 p.m. And I'm saying 7 p.m. because I think it is at the very least possible that we end up going to about 10 p.m. So I know sometimes a little bit later works better for people. But I also suspect that the members of the task force don't want to be meeting till 11 p.m. if you can avoid it. So I just wanted to get some consensus on that. Does that not work for anybody? If we're to do 7 to 10 p.m. on Wednesday, February 17th? Okay, I see.
It's fine for me. I did want to point out that's over school break. I think that's really different now in a pandemic. Like normally there'd be lots of people traveling during that time. I am hoping that's not the case right now, but yeah. So I did just want to point that out. I mean, that could be to our advantage.
The
right?
pandemic will be over by then.
I have a doctor's appointment on the 16th and still can't get my vaccine, even though I'm a forward-facing teacher. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I think that might actually be to our advantage, because I think fewer families than normal will be traveling, and they might be able to be around for such a meeting. But I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Actually, anybody can be around for the meeting. Doesn't matter where they are. It's on Zoom.
Depends what they're doing, though, I guess.
Right. We may have Kim a little bit late coming from something, and I know that might be the case for others too. All right, let's go with that then, unless Bonnie got something.
I was just going to say I was helping with the graphics, so should that be framed between 7 and 10?
I would say so. Yeah. We want to do is leave space for people to come and speak. I mean, I don't know. Devin may be better to say what to put on the flyer. I don't know if it's putting 7 to 9 on the flyer with the understanding that we're willing to be there till 10 o'clock might be better to do. It doesn't seem like such a heavy lift for people that might say, oh, I want to show up because it's a 3-hour event. But even though people can come, make their comment and go if they need to. But maybe that's better. What do you think, Devin?
Yeah, I think just including the start time is is totally fine for the flyer. And then when I post it on the website, I can add a little bit more context. We have a start and end time on all meetings on the town website. And then in the, location description, I can just add, this is an open house, if you will.
All right. Great. I don't know what the open house thing means, but
just like, come say what you want, leave.
Oh, sure. You don't have to stay for the entire meeting if you don't want to. Yeah. Okay.
So just leave it at that.
Yeah, just the start time, I think, on the flyer is fine. We can connect on that, Bonnie.
Great. And the one thing, that we'll need to do is, I may need to pull a couple of folks to help me just sort of put together the presentation, work with Devin on that, of course, but I certainly think that that I'd like to have a segment in there where Eitan, you kind of take it over and talk about the survey. There's no one better to talk about that than you. And there might be other segments where maybe I want to sort of throw it to someone else on the task force to talk about a specific area. Community engagement maybe being one of them. So I'll try to think that through now. But I'll probably MC the presentation and then maybe have different segments where members of the task force chime in. Okay, but we've got time for that. In the meantime, continue on. I love that we're all these public hearings are scheduled either at or during or before this window that we have, the February 1st through 5th window for the subcommittee hearings, which is great. That means that we'll be able to finalize subcommittee reports during the week of February 8th through 11th. A reminder that that the moment that those reports are finalized, to get them to Devin, Devin would love to have those at least 48 hours before our actual meeting, which is February 12th, where we're going to finalize the draft task force report. At this point also, for all of us, this is the point right now where if you've got thoughts on the work of other subcommittees, now is the time to share those thoughts with the members of those subcommittees. So if you think that there are elements that are missing or things you'd like to see, reflected in a stronger way or whatever it is, now is the time to communicate with them about that work. So please do reach out and share those thoughts. On February 12th, when we're finalizing the draft task force report, there may be opportunities to weigh in on one thing or another, but that is not the time where we'll be able to pick apart these reports and ask people to redraft in major ways or anything like that. That's just not the time. So I would also encourage you to be at those subcommittee hearings if you are available. My understanding is we're recording all of those as well. Devin, am I right about that part?
Sorry, say that again.
Are we recording all of those as well, the subcommittee hearings?
We certainly can, especially, I don't know if Departmental Analysis did, and if you did, you can send it to me and I will add it to the webpage. Most of the folks have asked to use the webinar feature moving forward for the public hearings, so that will be through my account and we can set those up to record and then I can post them.
Great. And I do know that Kathy Bisbee from Big reached out to me and is interested in live streaming these as well. So
I will connect with Big if everyone is comfortable with that. Then just give me shoot me a note. Okay, perfect. Looks like everyone's good to go. So we will coordinate that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That was really helpful. She reached out, and so that'll help extend the audience a little bit. Of course, folks that aren't in the meeting won't necessarily be able to make public comment, but at least they can watch us work and see what's happening. So that'll be good. All right. Anything else new business wise that folks need to bring up or that you want to address from a previous conversation today? Yeah, Alexander.
So just sort of some administrative things that are on my mind. In terms of the running of the webinars, I'm sensitive to the fact that running a webinar is, running these kinds of meetings is a small lift, but it is something that takes some time and attention. And I want to make sure that the members of the subcommittees are able to fully focus on the public hearing itself, and to be able to listen to what folks are saying. And I wonder if it might be smart, if for those of us who are willing and have the time, to volunteer to help out at each other's meetings, so you can just sort of sit in and spend a little time promoting and demoting folks who want to speak if you're using the webinar format, booting folks out if you get Zoom bombed, which, as Kristen and I can speak to, takes quite a bit of time. And I think that it could be a good thing. So that's sort of point one. Point two, it's not super clear to me, maybe this is just elsewhere and I've missed it, where the one-page list of meeting hearings times is, or if that's not yet been made. I know we've talked about it a little bit this morning.
I have that ready to go. Devin and I have been working on that.
Well, thank you, Bonnie.
The decision on the task force larger thing, and I'll add that big, we'll broadcast them to that.
Thanks so much. Sorry, I didn't understand that.
That's fine.
On the first piece, I think that's, yeah, I agree that would be helpful. So subcommittee members can focus. I will say, I don't know. I think in addition to the availability, someone also needs to have the technical expertise to help in that way. So I will take a look at, I think I can make all the subcommittee meetings. I also would rather be paying attention to what people are saying than, demoting or promoting and stuff like that. So maybe let me just talk to Devin and see if we have a solution for that, or if that's something that I need to do for you. We'll see. Or we can provide mutual aid to one another and help each other out. Okay. Anything else? All right, folks, great work so far. Let's keep talking. And this is the time where we have an opportunity to make each other's work better and to bring more people into the conversation to make our work better. Remember, those subcommittee hearings will, I think, go best if we, in addition to any members of the public that find out and want to show up, that'd be great. But also that you reach out to people that might have something to say with some content expertise that'll be able to weigh in, and we won't presume what it is that they'll have to say or what they'll think about our work, but people that will hopefully help make what our final product better. So be sure to make that outreach too. Great. Thanks again to everybody. Thanks to our staff, especially, and all the good people, stepping into this space and doing this work. I see that meeting on the horizon on March 2nd, where we get to present the final results of this. Doesn't mean the end of the work. It doesn't mean, the end of our work or the work of others to come. But I think that's going to be a really meaningful date, and I'm really excited that we're right on track, going right toward it. So just thank you, everybody.
It might mean some sleep.
What's that?
Might mean some sleep.
Might mean some sleep. That'd be good. All right, everybody, take care.